Well, good evening, everybody. I am John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. And tonight we have Bill Taylor up in New Jersey to give us a report from his research. Been enjoying his comments today on Twitter, back and forth with David Underdown on a number of interesting subjects, one of which is Richard Helms, if I'm not mistaken. And another lot of great research going on at Bill's website. It's d-statenews.com. There's no fake news there. It's all real. So welcome, Bill Taylor.
Thank you, John.
Well, thanks for being with us again. It's great to have a chance to check in with you from time to time, and I really enjoy it. And we get a good viewership too, so I know that means a lot of other people do enjoy it as well. Well, let's start with what you and David Underdown have been talking about with regard to a journalist named Jefferson Morley.
Jefferson Morley. Yeah. So today, while walking the dogs, I was listening to my normal list of podcasts, and one of my consistent go-to guys is William Ramsey of William Ramsey Investigates. He does. He's very prolific. He probably does one podcast broadcast a day. Typically interviews authors, especially authors with a conspiracy bent or true crime. He's done a number of interviews with just about any JFK assassination type of researcher you can imagine. One and the one today that he spoke to was Jefferson Morley, and he's had Jefferson Morley on in the past. Jefferson has written a book about James Jesus Angleton. He's written a book about, and I know he's got three. This is he just came out with the third book, which is primarily about another CIA guy named Richard Helms. Sorry, one of the first ones I think was Wisner, maybe, perhaps. It was a CIA guy in Mexico City. But this most recent book was Richard Helms. So I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt, especially somebody as sort of prolific as Jefferson Morley. But he did say a couple things on the podcast today about Richard Helms. It makes me think, he didn't either do his homework or he's trying to lead people in a different direction. He specifically mentioned Richard Helms. This is the thing that got my ears perked up. Richard Helms I'll just give you a little bit of background on Richard Helms. Richard Helms was the director of the CIA under Nixon. He had been in the upper echelons of the CIA since its beginning in the early 1950s, late 1940s. He came from a wealthy Philadelphia family, and Richard Helms is he was in charge of the CIA when Watergate went down. So the gist of Jefferson's book is the role that the CIA might have played in the Watergate conspiracy, and we won't get into too much there, but with respect to Helms and Jefferson's understanding of Helms's biography, Jefferson mentioned that Helms had met the Shah of Iran for the first time in 1972 or 73, whatever year it was that Richard Helms was dismissed or the year that Richard Helms resigned from the CIA as director, and Nixon appointed him the ambassador to Iran. So somebody could probably give you the exact date, but I'm pretty sure it's 72 or 73, probably no later than 68, of course. So I happen to know, and I think it's pretty well known, that Richard Helms was that could not have been the first time that Richard Helms ever met the Shah of Iran, is implied by or is told by Jefferson Morley. Richard Helms had gone to finishing school. I wouldn't say finishing school, but boarding school in Switzerland with the Shah of Iran back in the presumptive Shah of Iran way back in the 1930s. It might have been the late 1920s. Richard Helms was, and I think it's pretty well known. Richard Helms was in the CIA's Tehran station during the 1953 coup in Iran, which installed the Shah. And so it was curious that Jefferson would just sort of imply or say outright that Helms had only met the Shah in '73. One of the more interesting connections that I've found, and I'm sure Jefferson, I guess, never read my blog, is that the uncle of Mayor de Blasio, Bill de Blasio, whose real name is Warren Wilhelm Jr. Warren Wilhelm Jr.'s Bill de Blasio uncle was George Donald Wilhelm Jr., and he was commissioned by Richard Helms in 1961 to ghostwrite the memoirs for the Shah of Iran. So Helms was very tight with the Shah way before Nixon appointed him ambassador to Iran in the early 70s. And it was just perplexing that Jefferson would make this error or would make this assertion. It's relatively easy information to dig up, or at least the part about Helms' involvement in the 53 plot in Iran. One of the reasons that that I've always been suspicious of Jefferson, and it's probably not fair, but this is 2022. Nothing's fair. Jefferson Morley is I believe the nephew or the great nephew of a newspaperman named Felix Morley, who was pretty prominent in the all the way from the 1920s to the 1970s as a columnist, as an editor for the Washington Post at one time. I think his last gig was with the Washington Star. He wrote a number of different books. I believe he was a president of Haverford College, or maybe he taught there. But Felix Morley is a very interesting character. I've never been able to necessarily pin down his philosophy, other than that it was sort of a proto form of Buckley conservatism. I seem to everything I've read that Morley has written, at least in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, I've generally agreed with. But Morley is a Gibson Islander. Felix Morley is a Gibson Islander, so he knows these families pretty well, and you can't help but think that he managed to be a resident, or at least a summer resident of Gibson Island for a reason. Either they liked him or he was there maybe to take notes. But anybody who comes off of Gibson Island is immediately a suspect, and anybody related to a Gibson Islander is also immediately suspect. There's so many deep state connections to that island, to the CIA, to different corporations, that one can't help but wonder if Felix Morley was in on the grand plan, whatever that grand plan is for us all.
I see him in Geneva, Switzerland, which is just like that. That's like ground zero of the deep state, as far as I could say. We were reading about Geneva this morning in connection with early American financing through the Mallet Provost family, Schlumberger, and obviously the Dulles family. Deep connections to Geneva. And so here he is on a Guggenheim Fellowship to study the League of Nations.
There you go.
And writes a book called The Society of Nations. It sounds very much like a friendly federalist type of idea. In 1933, very significant year. And he wins a Pulitzer Prize. A very, very significant person. But now you place him on Gibson Island, and I've been with you from the beginning, and but a lot of people are not familiar with why we found Gibson Island to be so fascinating, and it's still paying us dividends. Tell us, just give us a brief synopsis for those folks that perhaps haven't heard about all of the riches and interesting stories of Gibson Island.
Uh, sure. So for one, Gibson Island is on the the western shore of Chesapeake Bay. It's about It's about an hour south of Baltimore if you're driving, maybe 40 minutes north of Annapolis if you're driving, longer by sailboat. And it's this enclave. It actually isn't on an island. It's connected by a long causeway, and every time you look at the residents of Gibson Island, which is only about 150 families, and say maybe a summer residency of 500 or 600 people. But every time you look at some of the names, you find some of the very, very wealthy, powerful people. You have the DuPonts, you have the Rockefellers, you have the Morgans, you have the Muellers, and then you have a number of spy or influential type people and journalists, Morley being one of them. You also have Bob Woodward had a house on Gibson Island for a number of years. I believe he lost it in a divorce. Pinchot of the Mary Pinchot Myers fame, former governor, her uncle had a house. The Symingtons actually started the modern form of Gibson Island by developing it in the 1920s. So, it's always been my contention that there's all kinds of global elite planning going on Gibson Island, at least during the 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe up into the 60s, and maybe it's still going on now, just because you have so many of these wealthy, powerful people, connected to the deep state, and I've done an extensive amount of work on it, whether and it's pretty much all logged on my blogs, D State News and D State Analytics. But there's always more to do, and I'm always finding new characters on Gibson Island.
I had two finds that I threw in with all of the ones that you and Mark Kulak and others have found. But my two finds were number one, Julian Amos. Julian Amos lived there. He was a real assassin, a real deep state mechanic. And he lived there. He was an assassin for them in Africa, and
Right.
Also connected with one of those private intelligence firms that operated out of Baltimore, and I can't remember the name of it. And then the other one, of course, is Thurgood Marshall,
Right.
who was a waiter in the Gibson Island Club. And just imagine, to me, that just speaks volumes, that he was a waiter, they're pushing plates, for all of these people that are making all of this, the plans for the new world order is being laid out on the tables right there in front of Thurgood Marshall as he's serving them dinner. It just keeps on giving more and more fascinating connections. So that's just a brief introduction to Gibson Island. If you want to learn more, get over to Bill's website, and this is a good chance for me to just put it up on the screen so you can see where it is. The address is d-statenews.com, and in 1 second it will be there. There we go. There's your story on Flight 800. I was working on that with you and others this week. More about Phil Murphy. You never let up on.
No, I can't, because it keeps getting better and better. The story gets, every time I look, there's a new addition to the Phil Murphy's, a deep state hack from a long time ago.
All right. Well, since you insist, tell us something about Phil Murphy.
So the latest. So one of my pieces, and I think it's a revelation in the world of JFK assassination theories. Phil Murphy's wife is Tammy Snyder Murphy. She's from Virginia Beach, Virginia, which is just right next to Norfolk, Virginia. The Snyder family, her family, are longtime longtime Norfolk residents. They once owned the largest department store in Norfolk. Her family tree branches in all kinds of crazy directions into the deep state, and one of her great uncles is a gentleman named Louis B. Fine. He's deceased now, but Louis Bernard Fine was a prominent Norfolk attorney, and he shows up in the JFK assassination files as a reference for a gentleman named Malcolm Jerry Hoy. Malcolm Jerry Hoy is known to JFK researchers as one of the witnesses to the JFK assassination that the FBI wanted to talk to. The Hoy story, Hoy was about 22 or 23, relatively fresh out of the Army, when he dropped his car off at the mechanic on the morning of November 23rd. 45 minutes later, he comes running back into the mechanic, says that he just saw the president get shot. And the mechanic thought it was suspicious. He called the FBI. The FBI finally catches up with Hoy, or gets interested in Hoy in the following August of 1964. Hoy tells a different story. An interview with Hoy's landlord in Dallas reveals that Hoy was practicing shooting a rifle into a closet. But apparently that was enough for the FBI, because they seemed to not have any more questions for Hoy after August of 1964. But the key part here from the Murphy connection is that Hoy had three references on his, on his FBI file. One of them was this Louis Bernard Fine, the prominent lawyer from Norfolk. He even ran for senator from Virginia at one point. And Fine is a relative of the Murphys. So we can connect the Murphy family to the JFK assassination that way. There's actually a couple different connections that I've found since the publication of my first piece a couple of months ago. It turns out that Hoy was employed by the General Motors plant in Arlington, Texas, at the time of the assassination. He had gotten a job at the GM plant as a welder in, say, May of 1963. That's where he worked when the assassination occurred. And I just found the other day, there was actually an investigation by possibly the Texas Rangers or the Dallas Police Force into the GM plant a few years in 1962 regarding a gambling ring that was associated with Jack Ruby. One of the other employees that was peripherally involved in this gambling ring was a gentleman named Silvero, and he also goes by the name Guzman, but we'll call him Silvero. Silvero worked in the GM plant just like Hoy did at that time, 1962, 63. And Silvero was a gun runner with Frank Sturgis earlier in the decade, in the late 50s. He was a gun runner, shipping arms to Cuba for the resistance or whatever. But it's an interesting connection because Frank Sturgis is also from Norfolk, just like Jerry Hoy. So you have two people peripherally connected to this to the JFK assassination via Norfolk, via Louis B. Fine, via Silvero and Frank Sturgis. And I don't think it's ever really been explored, but there's plenty to look at, and it even goes deeper than that. And I can't get into it too much now. But there's an interesting fellow in this gambling ring named Reckenberg. And the Reckenberg is the only other time I've seen the name Reckenberg was when a gentleman named Hans Reckenberg was speaking to Skorzeny, Otto Skorzeny, according to CIA documents in 1962. under the word of what the CIA had produced in their files. So there's a Rechenberg in Dallas, there's a Rechenberg in Berlin, and there's I'm looking into see if there's any relationship between these two Rechenbergs, and possibly maybe they're the same person for all I know.
It is tantalizing to think of those connections, and broadly in my thinking, I start trying to connect them to the synarchy, or the third force, or whatever you want to call it. The and when you say Skorzeny, that to me is a key. I wonder if anybody has tied Skorzeny to the JFK assassination. I guess somebody has done that work. Have you looked into that?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a relatively recent book. I haven't read the book that specifically ties Skorzeny to the JFK assassination. Um, I have run into Skorzeny through my research on Harold Noel Arrowsmith, who helped finance the founder of the United U.S. Nazi Party, George Lincoln Rockwell. So Arrowsmith Arrowsmith was speaking to this Rechenberg fellow who was an ex-Nazi in 1962. And the same week, according to the CIA files, Rechenberg was speaking to Skorzeny. So there's a couple of connections there. The problem is, and this is where we get back to Jefferson Morley and types like him. You have a lot of these gatekeepers, and I think that's what Jefferson is. Who will still argue about the number of creases on JFK's shirt ad nauseum, or make the case for him 1 millionth time that Oswald did not act alone. We all know that part. Let's figure out who did it. But you have these sort of gatekeepers in JFK research land, JFK publishing land. I would put Jim DiEugenio up there with him. Even maybe Lisa Pease, but we won't sully her name just yet. But they don't want to hear anything else, and they're busy people too. But there's a whole world of JFK files out there that could easily be parsed and gone through, and I think the expectation is that somebody else will do it, and then it doesn't get done. And even if you try and bring it to the attention of one of these lofty published authors who make a living off of this, off the conspiracy, there's not a lot of interest.
Well, I'm interested.
Of course. Well, I mean, that's where the effort is. There's probably been more progress made in the JFK assassination research in the past 2 or 3 years, to everybody getting interested in this, through the similar type coup that was very similar type deep state machinations that have gone on. It's opened up a whole new audience for conspiracy theorizing, I would say. And so you have to look at the granddaddy of them all, JFK, to get a sense of what's going on today.
Boy, that's exactly what I've been telling everybody since I started my show. Is if you want to understand what happened today, let's unfold the real story of the JFK assassination. The sooner we do that, the sooner we can move on, and it will break down an awful lot of false narratives that have just buried us with falsehoods. And the next generation's not going to know that they're falsehoods, because they'll have erased all the truth by then. And that's the plan. We learned it in our science fiction books when we were in high school. We know that's what they're doing. And Fahrenheit 451 is a recipe for exactly that. These science fiction writers were not just off in their heads, coming up with goofy fantasies. They were putting out real scenarios that are, it's like predictive programming, like I've always talked about Asimov being the same way. But before we leave Richard Helms, since my my show is a good part of it is about my dad and trying to unfold what happened to him in his career. And uh, we have to point out that Richard Helms was in charge of the MK Ultra program. He was also, let's just read from, let me just read from Wikipedia. He's so involved with things that involve my dad. So let me just share this with you guys. This is Wikipedia. In 1953, Dulles became the fifth DCI under Eisenhower. John Foster Dulles, his brother, was Eisenhower's Secretary of State. Under the Deputy Director of Plans, Helms was specifically tasked in the defense of the agency against the threatened attack by Senator Joe McCarthy, and also in the development of truth serum and other, quote, mind control drugs, per the CIA's controversial Project MK Ultra. From Washington, Helms oversaw the Berlin Tunnel. By the way, that was a disaster. An espionage operation. Regarding CIA activity, Helms considered information obtained by espionage to be more beneficial in the long run than the more strategically risky work involved in covert operations. Under his superior and mentor, the DDP Frank Wisner, the CIA marshaled such covert operations, which resulted in regime change in Iran, Guatemala, and the Congo. During the crises in Suez and Hungary, the DDP Wisner became distraught, and Wisner left in 1958. Passing over Helms, DCI Dulles appointed Richard Bissell as the new DDP. During the Kennedy presidency, Dulles selected Helms to testify before Congress on Soviet-made forgeries. In other words, Richard Helms is right in the middle of the CIA versus FBI war and the CIA taking over the Pentagon operation, as well as overseeing the Laos, which I didn't mention, but he's also very much involved. So my dad would have known him from the involvement of our special forces in Laos on the secret missions in the late 50s into and through the 1960s. The Montagnards, that was a Richard Helms project. This guy is very, very important, and in trying to understand what happened, and you have somebody who has inside contacts like a Jefferson Morley, and yet he writes something that even somebody, a good researcher, but I think admittedly an amateur researcher like yourself, can easily debunk. So that's the story of our times. We are getting just loads and loads of crap piled on top of us to make it impossible for us to sift through it and see the truth. But the truth is there. That's why we have to keep reading the books, because it is a limited hangout, but the stuff they hang out is worth it. I feel the same way. And maybe I'm being a little unfair, but I feel the same way about Annie Jacobsen, and and this book is wonderful. It has just given me so much, but when it comes right down to it, I don't think she's telling us all that she knows, and I think that this is part of their method of keeping control, is to give us some really juicy stuff, but then throw in with it some narrative that they want us to swallow along with it, and unfortunately, we have to wade through it.
Right. No, and it's always a narrative. I mean, one of the things that I think I've learned, or now that I suspect, is even some of the more mainstream Oswald did it books. I know there's a Gerald Posner book which was lambasted by the JFK research crowd that said that Oswald did it unequivocally. I think it came out years ago, but they're still fighting over it. But I would suggest that Posner puts that out there so that the JFK researchers on the right side of history can argue with Posner forever and not make any progress towards actually figuring out who in the deep state is involved.
But let me jump in because you mentioned Gerald Posner, and I am familiar with that criticism, but this is a good example for me because he wrote an incredibly powerful book called God's Bankers,
Mhm.
in which he lays out the whole uh, Vatican bank scandals going way back, and it doesn't. I don't think he pulls any punches. I think it's a really. I mean, I studied that book pretty thoroughly, and so it's an example of hey, uh, he probably knows that Oswald didn't act alone. And he's got to be sophisticated enough to know that, but nevertheless, that kind of puts a black mark on all of his work.
Right. Right.
But nevertheless, some of his work is really worth studying, and it's just remarkably frustrating.
Right. Right. I think you see that a lot. There's Russ Baker, who did a great book on the Bush dynasty
Yeah,
a couple decades. But now he runs a alternative news site called Who What Why, and I remember him begging for money for years. Because he wanted to get off the ground and write stories in essays and do real research on the deep state. But if you look at he sort of seems to have swung in favor of the Cheney Bush cabal, who he previously lambasted. And if you look on his website and see who the list of donors are, there's Abigail Rockefeller is right there on the list. So it's and a whole bunch of other East Coast establishment names that you really wouldn't trust as far as you could throw them, but that they're good for a couple $1 million. Their checks are not going to bounce. So I can't take anybody like that seriously. He wrote the book on Bush. It was a great book. He never followed up on it. He started Who, What, Why. I'm sure he needed the money, and somebody came in and said, "Here's $500,000. Don't write anything stupid." He said, "Okay."
Yeah, it's sad, but yeah, I mean, his book on Bush is really a killer. And
It's brutal. I mean, it's an excellent book. He's great to listen to in his old interviews. But he's a deranged Trump lunatic now. He suffers just like the rest of the mainstream media.
I tell you, it's not just money. I think it's something else. I think there's just a really dark side to this, because there's people that get flipped that don't need the money, and there's people that, I mean, that you would think wouldn't ever get flipped, and there they go.
Yeah.
I mean, they've really stuck. I think that there's more to it than the carrot. There's also a stick.
There's the carrot, which is the money. There's the stick, is the video at Epstein Island. If those fail, there's I think what they use, and I think what they've always used is, and I mentioned this before, is the promise of some sort of esoteric knowledge. It might have been the Masonic secrets 100 years ago, but today it's probably UFOs. If you want to see what's in Area 51, give us $1 billion to fund this eugenics project in Ukraine. And somebody like Bill Gates, he wants to see those UFOs in Area 51. And you can drag him along for years. I'm not saying he wasn't on Epstein Island as well, but money's not going to buy him. If he has any brain, he doesn't get tempted to go to Epstein Island. Or similar types like him, So the last thing you hold out is maybe something so secret or perceived to be so secret that he would be only one of only 3 people in the world to know. It's just a thought, because I don't think you can corrupt everybody.
Mm. Well, looking at the Democratic Party, I don't know if you might be wrong about that.
But they don't have money. I mean, how do you maybe Elon Musk is just as dirty as the rest of them, but I mean, there still has to be some honorable billionaires out there. I mean,
Are you kidding me?
or at least see what the trap before they get into it. You know, I don't think Bill Gates is a smart guy.
Those are the ones that went down on the Titanic.
Right. Well, and maybe they are. You know, Bill Gates, I could see. You know, he's a nerdy guy. Nobody. Women are not going to pay attention to him. So I could see him. If he's got the money, you can't buy him off. But I mean, you can maybe entrap him. But there's got to be some guys that's just like, you know, I see this coming from a mile away. Donald Trump, he's a billionaire, or he was a billionaire. You know, how do you what's the promise? I mean, what's a quid pro quo?
Oh,
some people just say, is Bill Clinton? It's Epstein Island. You got him for life.
I think that somebody's got some stuff on Donald Trump too.
I'm sure. I would probably. But I also think that we would have seen something.
They
hate him. They hate him so much. You know, and they want to get rid of him so badly. Why didn't they do that the first year he was in office, or the second year? You know.
Yeah. Well,
unless he's playing a part too.
They've all got, everybody's got their dossiers,
Right.
You hit me, I'll hit you.
Yeah. I mean, even Bezos, who's kind of, I wouldn't call him reprehensible, but he does own the Washington Post, which is a CIA organ. He's been pushing back on Biden a little bit with his inflation talk, and this is not good for the overall economy.
Well, there's a good question though. Is the Democratic Party starting to maneuver away from Biden because a lot of people are saying that it's because Ukraine is just become such a nightmare for him. I mean, there's really no way out. He just has to keep escalating, and that's another case where I think, it's not in Biden's interest to declare war against Russia. Why would he want to do that? Nevertheless, every single indication is that the United States is pushing as hard as it can to actually get in a shooting war against Russia. And I can't figure out why we would want to do that, not for our own purposes, but it's other people's purposes, like the Europeans, like the Vatican, for instance, we were talking about. I mean, there are serious, long-standing, hundreds and hundreds of year grievances between certain European powers and the Russians, and they want to control it. They want to control Russia. Now, why in the world is the United States pushing so hard and really, I mean, giving billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of our money to them in the form of weapons, which then, of course, only 10% of it actually gets to the front line because there's so much corruption. Well, why in the world are we doing it? I don't get it, but maybe you do.
I mean, the way the Democrats are behaving, and Biden especially, it's almost like some force is acting on them to alienate every single possible what's the word I'm looking for? Constituency that the Democrats has ever had. I mean, they're angering. I mean, I just posted a picture on Twitter a little while ago, a couple of hours ago. It was the admiral who wears a dress and the nuclear weapons storage manager. I forget what, some agency head who also wears a dress, and it's he is bald. It's you're not winning. It's almost like somebody's putting Biden up to say, look how stupid we could be, because you're not winning the cross-dressing admiral vote. That's not going to win an election. You get all the cross-dressing admirals and naval officers to vote for Biden. That's 12 people in the United States. But you're alienating all these families. I would say you're alienating African American families who are relatively conservative with this kind of stuff, Hispanic families, which are largely Catholic, and they're conservative with transgenderism and teaching kids this weird, putting this emphasis on sex, and not only sex but also sort of deviant type levels of sex education. And
I don't think the word deviant even has any meaning anymore.
I'm trying to be polite.
But I'm so totally with you. This is insane what they're doing to children. I mean, I was read something yesterday where they said that children as young as 2 years old can become aware of their trans nature.
Right.
What?
Right.
I mean, that's but what my suggestion to you is that he's not doing it to primarily to get votes or to alienate people. He's doing it because he's using his power to publicize this stuff, because it is part of their vision of the new world order. That these people that are pushing this new world order, they want this stuff front and center. They want these, cross-dressing admirals, and they want every, possible combination of sexuality labeled and put onto a meme on kids' T-shirts.
Right.
They want this stuff, and that is why Biden's doing it, because he's doing it as part of the big agenda. That's what I think, and it's also very convenient that it puts off people like you and me and makes us sick, because that means that they've got the country divided again. Because
but that's the thing. I don't think it divides the country. I think everybody is united. I have the picture up on a share screen if you want to show it. I think it unites families of every race, creed, and color.
No, I ain't going to show it. I've seen it, and it's so upsetting that I don't want to look at it.
Everybody says, "What WTF?" I mean, Democrats need African American families to vote for them, or else they've got nothing. And how does this not piss them off? And I'm sure it does. I'm almost guarantee you it does.
But all they got to do is yell, "Orange man, orange man!" Orange man, orange man's coming. And everybody runs to the polls and votes for the cross-dressing Democrats.
There's Brett Weinstein. I don't know if you ever listen to him, Dark Horse podcast. He had the gentleman from Belgium who coined the term. Now I'm going to get it wrong. Mass psychosis.
That's Matt.
That's right. Okay. There was an interesting discussion about bringing the level. One way to combat this mass hypnosis psychosis, I don't have the term exactly right, is to take it to such an absurd level that people just revolt against it. I mean, this is taking transgenderism is taking it to an absurd level of idiocy. It almost has to collapse on itself because it's so absurd. This is that's what I think. That's why I almost think this picture is there to it's like another force is out there forcing these pictures of a man in a dress and another man in a dress pretending to be women, okay, with the admiral flag on, and just alienating the rank and file citizenry of the United States who really could care less, and they don't want to see it, and most of all, don't want it shoved down their kids' throats. They're playing with fire. If this is a plan to move an agenda forward by the deep state, they're playing with fire, and it's on top of the COVID hoax, which in the vaccine. Vaccine adverse reactions that are making people think that another WTF moment. What is going on here? This is just opening our eyes. I would suggest that the TW800 flight information that came out from William Teal last week, which we haven't gotten into, is just that sort of acclimating type of information that makes people consider that, hey, people in authority in the U.S. government lie to us. They've been lying to us since 1996 when that TWA went down. What else have they lied to us about? Now, I'm not suggesting that William Till is part of some conspiracy of good guys to make the people of the United States wake up, but it does come at an opportune time. And anybody on Long Island, New York, okay, they all remember this event, and especially here at the Jersey Shore too, because we're right in the New York City media empire sphere of influence. You know, if you can consider that the CIA made a fake animation video and faked that whole thing, and it was an accident by the Navy that was covered up by the Clintons, well, then they're certainly capable of covering up all kinds of other crimes and false flags over, in the ensuing decades.
Yeah, and that is one of your main stories over at dstatenews.com, and folks should definitely catch up.
I'll take that down. I'll take that horrible picture down.
Oh, that's okay. It's it's gone now. No, I've seen it before, and I mean, I'm with you, but at the same time, it's not like it's not like an isolated incident. That's just one little piece of evidence in what I would say is a vast train of such events that are always pushing themselves into the public eye, and especially in front of children, and it makes me sick.
Right. That's what wakes people up. You could do a lot of, we found out in the past 2 years, you can do a lot to people, and even do things to their children, like give them a jab that hasn't been tested on anything, and the only thing it was tested on was ferrets, and they all died. But you give it to your kids. But the uptake on the vax, or at least the boosters, is a lot less than it was on the first 2 initial doses. So people finally, I think that they're waking up to some extent. People are angry. My mother-in-law was saying that 2 people at Costco were fighting over a watermelon on Saturday. I mean, that's, this is, people are losing their temper. There's some kind of shift happening that I think, and
losing,
hopefully it's for the better. It can't get any worse. Well, I guess it can, but
we haven't talked about the economy. Talk about getting worse, but I don't know about you, but my 401k lost like 10% in the last quarter. Why? The stock just going down. Why is it? Well, who knows why? I don't know why, but it starts to look shaky, and are they manipulating it? Is it really the crash? Is it is it just another opportunity for them to sell short and buy cheap, or is it is it all just completely out of control, and who knows where it's going to go? I'll give you a minute or two to tell us the answer.
You want my theory, or you want me to tell you what's happened? I mean, I know
where my money is.
I'll tell you. So I'm in finance for 25 years, and the last couple of shops I worked for were not white shoe firms. My first couple were white shoe firms. My last couple were not. And the way I saw the sausages being made, it got sick to my stomach, because the regulators, FINRA especially, I think goes out of the way to keep the crappiest firms in business so that they could pay fines every year on a consistent basis. And FINRA, since FINRA has become a private corporation, for-profit corporation, that's where that's what their primary interest is.
What's that thing? What's FINRA?
FINRA is the I'm going to say it wrong. It's the regulatory body, non-governmental regulatory body authorized by the SEC to regulate the financial services industry. It regulates anything where securities are traded. So, they will come in and audit your books. They will fine brokers for recommending products that are not suitable for widows and orphans. They have a whole host. It's essentially everything that the SEC is allowed to do under the law, but cannot do without without the resources that it would require. Monitoring insider trading, licensed brokers. There's probably 70 different financial licenses. So FINRA is the bad guy, and the SEC is the parent. And actually, I've dealt with the SEC before, and they've been very pleasant to deal with. And they think FINRA is gone off the rails themselves. At least some of the rank and file SEC gentlemen and ladies that I've dealt with in the past, I would deal with them any day compared to FINRA. Anyway, the point being that FINRA has a really vested interest since about 15 years ago to keep bad actors in the securities industry, because you could always find that bad actor a couple $100,000 a year, and if FINRA shows higher and higher profits. The incentives to police have been bastardized over the past 15 years. As far as why the market is going down today, this is my theory. The drug money is no longer flowing out of Afghanistan into Canadian banks, and there's just not enough money to buy securities anymore to keep the market afloat.
Uh-oh.
That
doesn't sound good.
That's my theory. And that's why I think those Canadian banks had a holiday a couple months ago.
Yeah.
I would not be, because Canadian banks are metals and natural resource banks. They fund the natural resources all over the world. And the only thing really Ukraine and Russia are producing are natural resources. That's their hard assets. So I would suggest, and I have no proof of this, I would suggest that Afghanistan drug money was being recycled or washed in Ukraine, and at some point when the Afghanistan drug money started flowing into Ukraine, it no longer flowed to the west through these Canadian banks, through gas trades and oil trades and gold, silver, and other metal trades, and that money is no longer keeping the market afloat like it was for a long time.
Bill, that's a very fascinating subject, and I want to get into it some more with you. And I am also interested in creating another little trio with perhaps you and David Underdown one night. Would you be willing to join us for a three-way discussion of these issues?
Sure, certainly. Will there be food?
No. we're on a low budget here, Bill. All right, but anyway, you can bring.
I would like that. That'd be good.
Just bring your own. All right, everybody. Thanks. We're going to set that up soon, and look forward to that. Tomorrow, I will be back with. What am I doing tomorrow? Oh, tomorrow, I have Minefields at 11 a.m. So we'll see you for that.
I'll tune in. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye. All right. Bye.